Hello, everybody, and welcome to the November Shorts and Sorcery live stream. Today, I am going to be talking about the October book pick for the Shorts and Sorcery book club, which was This All Come Back Now, edited by Michaela Saunders, and this was an anthology of First Nations speculative fiction. And this, to me, is a very interesting anthology because, first of all, this has been the um, first time that I have gotten the chance to actually read something by Australian authors, not just Indigenous authors, but Australian authors in general. I haven't, to my knowledge at least, uh, been very proactive in trying to read fiction by Australian authors. So this was a very interesting experience for me to pick up this book and read it. And one of the interesting things about this is that, first of all, it is edited by Michaela Saunders, who is Indigenous herself. And all of the creators, all of the authors are Indigenous who have stories in this anthology. But not only that, the cover designer is Indigenous. The artist who did the cover art is Indigenous. And the small press that published this originally, this anthology, is Indigenous. So aside from the what Michaela Saunders called the means of production, almost every part of the planning and putting this anthology together has been done by Indigenous creators, which I thought that was such a fantastic and cool thing. And other things to note about this collection is that this is a repeat collection. So all of the stories that were published in this anthology were actually published previously in either other print magazines or other anthologies. But this is sort of like what I would call kind of like an archive or a compendium of Indigenous speculative fiction, so that you have like this one book and all of these stories are sort of coming together to like collect part of like Indigenous storytelling into one place, which I thought was neat. I would have wanted to see some stories that were specifically written for this collection, but I am not going to talk too negatively about reprint collections either, because they do serve a purpose. Um, One thing before I will go over my favorite stories, I am not going to delve too deeply into stories that I did not like. I want to focus on the positives, and I want to go over like my top 5 stories and talk about them in a little bit more depth. But I will say that one negative aspect that I know that for me was a negative. It may not be a negative thing to other people, but for me, um, anthologies of short fiction should focus on having short fiction in them. And this one had multiple stories that were actually sort of repurposed extracts of larger narratives. So there are at least two stories that were extracts from like full-length novels, and some other stories that were basically like these sort of like try a chapter of a larger thing. And I think that really showed, because those were the stories that, in my opinion, were kind of the weakest. They ended abruptly, and they did not seem to have like a purposeful arc, because obviously if they are part of a larger story, then that whole narrative doesn't work in the same way as a short story that has been planned from the beginning to be a short story, if you know what I mean. So that aspect kind of bothered me. I would have wished that all of those extracts of larger novels could have been replaced with actual short stories that were meant to be short stories from the beginning. So those were my sort of like negative thoughts. And now I want to go over some of the stories that I really liked. I am expecting to be here around probably half an hour or so. This is how long I usually like expect to run these live shows. But my very first favorite that I really liked was Clatter Tongue by Karen Wilde. Um, this basically has this character who is indigenous, and she is a woman, and she experiences these things where she is sometimes harassed on the street, or when she has to speak to authority figures and they are undermining her, she kind of loses her ability to speak. And when she tries to speak, all of these sort of artifacts from the past fall out of her mouth. Like in one example, all this like weapons and artillery starts falling from her mouth when she's trying to like confront this harasser. And this calls back to the time when Australia was first colonized by the British. And then in some other instances, actual people, like shadows of people that were lost when children were taken from their parents, like those people come from her mouth. And like that is why it's called the clatter tongue. It's kind of like um, this idea of losing your voice and losing the power of speech because of generational trauma and loss and what has been taken from you, that you carry this weight of all of these burdens and things on your shoulders all the time, but you don't even have the voice and the way anymore to express it fully. And it's also about like trying to claw back a semblance of agency. So I really liked this story, and it was very lovely to read, and I really enjoyed it, and I would definitely want to read more work from Karen Wilde. And then another story that I really liked, which is completely different, is Hakaranda Street by Jasmine McCoy. And this veers more towards like a horror type of story. It deals with ghosts, and it also has this idea of people being haunted by memories and haunted by um, even ideas of other people. And there's this thing that happens is that when these characters, the story talks about like this couple, and each of the people in this relationship brings back a ghost of some kind when they are coming home, and they pass by this um, like construction site essentially, and they bring back a ghost. And these ghosts usually disappear, but like it's like it it is very interesting, like how these characters are each haunted by different like memories and things, and the reason why they are haunted in the first place is left quite open. But I think that the story is also very relatable, because each of us usually has something that we miss, that we wish that we could connect with people that we have lost. And that is also a type of haunting as well, is that you have these memories of people that you don't see anymore, and what you would give to have one more moment with them. I thought that that was very powerful, so I really liked that. And it was also very creepy in like really subtle ways. Like it isn't like full on knock your socks out scary, but it definitely like packs a punch, and I, especially the ending, left me a little bit speechless. And then the third story that I really liked and enjoyed was Your Own Aborigine by Adam Thompson. And this is a sort of a very near future, sort of light speculation, light sci-fi story. So, and it doesn't really tackle science in a sense, but like more like social and legal system. Like this is commenting on near future or future social and legal systems and what those could look like. So basically, what happens is the framing device of the story is that the Australian government has basically decided to get rid of welfare as it is now, and taxpayer money is still being put towards welfare for other people. However, um, now basically every single person who is on welfare has a sponsor, like a tax-paying, like a random taxpayer is now the sponsor for a person who is on who has to receive like welfare checks. And this sort of like comments on the idea of having the good one. So this story has like three people who are meeting up at a bar, and they are comparing um, their aborigines, their like the people they are sponsoring. They are comparing them, and each of them is like, yeah, mine is the best, the good one, because they are going to college, and like my money is helping this person to go through college, and they're like doing the most. And another person is like, well, this person, the one I'm sponsoring, runs like an orphanage, and they're doing the most. And then there is this the third person um, says that he has had a dud, that he has had he has like one of those bad people who like lives on welfare checks and doesn't care. And it commentates on this idea of who deserves social security and help, and like why others would judge people who are like like what like basically people are judging others for their situations in life, and not questioning the societal structures that have put them in that place where they need help, instead of blaming the victim, so to speak. And it's also like this idea of like not only who deserves social security and help, but also like that only if you pass like a certain standard of purity and certain standard of goodness, that you are allowed help. And yeah, it's like I thought that this was very interesting, but also hit very close to home, because like I have personally been unemployed, and I have been on the receiving end of like welfare checks myself, and so the attitudes displayed in the story are very familiar. But I also understand that given the racialized aspect and the like intersection of race and class and like poverty, um, like that will have a very different um, impact. Like it is exacerbated when like race intersects with class, which in this case it does, because they're talking about like Aborigine people who are being sponsored by these like regular schmoes, essentially. I really enjoyed this. This was a very short story, but I thought that it was very interesting to read, and I would recommend reading it. And then fourth on my list is When From by Mariana Salem. And this one was interesting because it deals with time travel. And it basically has this concept that time travel is the world's worst kept open secret. And how time travel could be used as a tool of colonization, and how it could be used to literally rewrite history, to paint like settler colonialists in a more positive light. And in this case, all of these people, like when people travel through time, and basically rewrite things and like meddle with history, they are not actually erasing history. Like, they are erasing parts of it, but the people in the future, in the current timeline, like they retain a sort of shadow of what actually was there. But they kind of like have this weird, like almost like a dementia of like, I know that I know that I had this memory, and I feel like what is happening in front of me does not match what I remember. And that was a really interesting like idea of this, like basically a kind of gaslighting happening through this time travel, where people are like, I remember that they're like, I remember that these bad things have happened, but now they have not actually happened. But my mind still remembers that. That was interesting. And the main character is a person who starts working for this kind of movie industry, and she goes to work there as a time traveler, and her job is essentially to go to these far off places and to try and do whatever it is that the movie executives want her to do. And when she goes there, she's unable she's unable to like comply, and she gets basically brought back. And the story ends really abruptly. I would have read more from this author, like and I would have read more from this world, and I actually would be really interested if this would be like a novella or even a full-length novel. I would very much like want to know the full story, like what happened, like what are all of the things that time travel has done to the world, and how it has been misused. And yeah, this just had a very interesting concept, and I also really enjoyed the way it was written. And finally, my fifth favorite story in this collection was Water by Ellen van Nerven. And this one is basically, people find this new plant species that are essentially kind of like humans, but not mammals. They're plants. And this has kind of like the idea of a creature feature, where there is this whole like group of plant people, and they are very reminiscent of, for example, the swamp thing. So they are all these like kind of like poison ivy type like plant creatures with like flowers growing out of their like heads, and like vines for hands, etc., etc. And this goes over this idea of what it means to be human, and who even gets to have humanity and human rights, and specifically who gets designated as a human. And this story also touches upon like medical experiments that are often committed against like marginalized groups, and how marginalized groups are often the target of like experimentation and other unethical um, practices, and usually without their knowledge or consent. And so there are brief like allusions throughout the story to that. And the story is also quite sapphic in nature. So there are like queer elements, and it's basically the two main characters are the sort of de facto leader of the plant people, and also and an indigenous queer woman is the other main character, and they are in communication with each other. And it's also about this, like, the woman is working for and the institution, the research center that is researching these plant creatures, and she's kind of working as the sort of cultural liaison between the two groups. And yeah, uh, it was a really interesting story to me, and I quite liked it. This was probably one of the um, more science fictiony type stories, because, like, in this collection, a lot of these stories do have like a speculative element, but usually it is very subtle, and usually it is also more dealing with like the humanities and like the social scientific aspects of like what science fiction and speculative fiction can offer, instead of like the hard science. So this one definitely, Water by Ellen van Nerven, definitely felt more like a science fiction, as opposed to like a light speculative fiction story. So yeah, I really enjoyed it, and those were my 5 favorite stories. Um, would I say that were they enough to read this entire collection for those stories? I would say yes. Um, Even though some other stories in the collection did not impress me all that much, and there was definitely a sort of like unevenness in terms of like what was there in terms of what I typically want from stories. Um, I am very happy that I read this book. I am very happy that I picked it for the book club, and I hope that I have managed to introduce it to some other people who may not have heard of it before and could be interested. So even if you did not like participate um, in the reading during October, the discussions are still up in the Goodreads group, and if you ever want to like come back to that and have a look and read through the stories yourselves, um, you should definitely do that, because I think that this was a good project, and I think that it is nice to have these sorts of anthologies where it sort of serves like a central hub for a variety of indigenous literature. So yeah, I definitely would recommend this collection. I very much enjoyed it. And this month in November, we will be reading Anathema magazine Spec from the Margins. And it's the issue 15, so May issue. Um, Issue 16 just recently came out. So like if you have read the issue 15 already, I could also suggest that you should check out issue 16. But for the book club specifically, we will be reading the um, issue 15 from May. And I am very much looking forward to it. I have it on my Kobo already, and I am primed and ready to start reading it. So I hope you will join me for it. And once again, this magazine is available to read for free from Anathema's website. But if you are financially able, please do consider supporting them, so that they can keep on. So that they can keep on working on the magazine and include all like new authors and include diverse voices as well. So yeah, 24 minutes. I am very happy. Kept pace really well, and thank you, Mr. Rorosuri, for being here. And yeah, let me know if you like if you are either here now, or if you are watching this as a recording. Please leave me a purple heart emoji, just like Mr. Orosuri has done here, so that I know that you are here. And also, like, if you are interested in picking this book up, please let me know. Like, have I convinced you about the worthiness of this anthology? Because I hope I have. Um, and yeah, I am going to go and rewatch Black Panther now because tomorrow I am going to the cinema to watch Black Panther Wakanda Forever. So yeah, I just re-upped my Disney Plus and everything in order to do that. So yeah, and thank you so much, and I will see you with another live show hopefully next week because I think, and we will probably be mentioning this in community posts and on Twitter, but on Sunday, November 20th, we should have a Stitch and Bitch coming on Kelsey's channel on the Fancy Hat Lady Reads. So, but I will let you know through community posts to closer to the time. And yeah, I will see you next time. And the next live show for Shorts and Sorcery Book Club will be of Anathema Magazine issue 15, and it will most likely be at the second Saturday of December. So see you then. Bye bye.